Hey, welcome back to Fast Pawns. Today we're going to be covering the isolated queen spawn pawn structure, which is one of the most common pawn structures ever. This video will definitely benefit you. Even if you're not a d4 player, you will still see these types of positions a lot. So what are the characteristics of an IQP? How do you identify one? Well, the person with the IQP will have a D pawn, which is isolated, meaning that there are no adjacent pawns on either the C or E squares. Now, let's quickly talk about the key plans and ideas for both the IQP and the person playing against it. So, if you have the IQP, you want to take control of the D5 square. You want to have as many pieces as you can pointing towards the D5 square in order to prepare the push on D5. The reason you want to push D5 is because you want to create a strong kingside attack on black. And the purpose behind that is that the D4 square, which is isolated, can be a big strength in the middle game, but if you transition into the end game, it will become a weakness as it becomes an inherent target, since if we look at black's pawn structure, there are no weaknesses, whereas this D square is a easy target since there are no pawns which can protect it. So if you go to an end game with, let's say, 2 rooks, you will have to use both of them to protect this pawn, whereas black will be able to exploit your other weaknesses. So your main plan is to eventually create this push and keep as many pieces as you can on the board. You want to avoid trading pieces at all costs. Now, likewise, if you're playing against the IQP, you want to create a blockade on the D5 square. Generally speaking, you're going to place a knight there. The purpose of that is to prevent this pawn from being pushed. And you want to trade off as many pieces as possible as soon as you can. Once again, the purpose of this is that in the end game, this pawn becomes an inherent weakness. And just a little later, I will show you guys an example of how to exploit this weakness in an endgame where the isolated queen spawn wasn't pushed. So just to summarize, if you're playing with the IQP, keep as many pieces as you can on the board. That's 1. Prepare this D4 to D5 push. That's 2. And reroute your pieces so that they all support this D5 square. That's 3. For the side playing against the IQP, blockade this D5 square by placing a knight or a bishop on this square. Trade off as many pieces as you can, and attempt to stop D4, D5 at all costs. So put all of your resources into preventing this push. Now, this is a game between Artur Yusupov and Eric Lobron. This game is classic in terms of IQP. It shows you how to properly use your IQP and how to be able to capitalize on the D5 square being inadequately protected. So let's quickly skip over here. We now have this IQP structure. As we can see, 1, 2, 3 pieces support this D5 push. Black brings a piece in order to prevent D5. Here, I think knight C6 was a slight inaccuracy. Much better move would have been something like, for example, even knight H6, or just simply pushing this pawn up to prevent bishop G5. You could also play knight D7, queen C7, and then reroute this knight. But generally speaking, you want to have as many pieces as you can stirring in this D5 square. And placing a knight on C6 is generally speaking quite awkward since it doesn't do all that much from this particular position. Here, I think black could have taken this knight and gotten a hanging pawn structure, which will be discussed at a later video, by the way. I want to start this series on different pawn structures, so definitely stay tuned for that. However, I mean, bishop e7 is fine. Having the pawn on c3 supporting this d4 pawn would have created different plans entirely for black, and it wouldn't have been really pleasant, so I guess retreating is a legitimate option. White drops the bishop back to c2 with the purpose of rerouting it to b3. Slightly better move would have been bishop b1 in order to place this bishop on a2, because it's just a little bit safer from there, but it doesn't really matter. Black develops, white develops, and we get into this position where black plays queen d6. Queen d6 is black's one and only main mistake in this particular game. The reason for that is that the queen on d6 does not actually help prevent d5 in any way, since if d5 were to, let's say, get pushed and this bishop was on b3, the queen wouldn't have any role in protecting, since the only way you could protect is by sacrificing itself for the pawn. A much better alternative was queen c7 in order to place this a-rook on d8, and from there, the d-rook would actually reinforce this d5 square. Also, something important to keep in mind is that right now, this blockade does not work because the knight just trades off itself, and you end up with an IQP versus IQP in a position where white is a little bit better because of active piece play. Now, white plays bishop g5 in this position. And the purpose of this, we will see very, very soon. Black places a rook on the d file. So does white. And now, as we can see, queen d6 was recognized as a mistake by Eric Lobron. He has to retreat the queen back to b8. So we can just see that by playing queen d6, black wasted a tempo and gave just what was enough for white to create a devastating attack. Bishop b3, a6, and now this pawn gets pushed. As we can see, so many pieces are left on the board, nothing was traded off. Super powerful attack. Black has to move this knight. If black were to capture this pawn, white could sacrifice this rook for a bishop, then take this knight, and this would be devastating. I mean, white would just be up an entire piece. Now these rooks are x-rayed. Black could resign that position. So taking the pawn obviously wasn't an option, and this was the whole idea around bishop g5. So black plays knight e5. White sacrifices his own queen by playing d takes e. The point is that if black were to capture this queen, white were to capture this pawn with check, and promote to just whatever piece. And after capturing, white would be up plenty of material, and this would be enough to win the game. So obviously, black doesn't do that. Black captures the bishop, which seems to be the lesser of the evil, but as we quickly see, it is not. As after just a few moves, white is left with a great initiative, a very, very strong attack, and rook d3 is played just to support the rook to prevent it from being attacked. After the move rook f8, white takes this bishop, and black resigns. And the reason for that is after knight captures, this check happens, and this knight hangs. That's a great example to show you guys because it demonstrates just how powerful the IQP can be when you push in the right position. It's important to recognize here that you have more pieces that protect this pawn, so it's a very powerful push. And it's also important to acknowledge the kind of just these open files that the rooks are on. So if this pawn were to capture the d pawn, suddenly this sacrifice is very powerful. And this is very thematic in IQP structures where you're going to be giving up a rook for 2 exchanges, or at least threatening to do so, which is why it's important to recognize that this push is possible in a lot of positions. Now I want to show you guys a position from a game from the book on pawn structures by Grandmaster Mauricio Flores Rios. A lot of the structures and examples that you guys will see in this following series will be from his book. It's very, very informative, and it contains pretty much all of the popular pawn structures. So if you guys are interested in checking that out, please do. Huge acknowledgement to him. So this position is going to showcase how black can create a strong kingside attack using the IQP. Here it's black to play, and black plays in the move knight f8, which is a hard move to spot, but the idea behind it is pretty simple. The point is you're going to place the knight on e6 and support this d5 square. And once you understand those ideas, with whatever pawn structure you're playing, it's going to be easier to spot these types of moves since you know what your plans are generally, and creating those plans becomes pretty simple. Here white played knight d4, which is the common blockade that we see in IQP. Here we play queen b6 in order to further attack this knight and attack this d5 square. White plays bishop f3, and this is an inaccuracy. It is very, very important to protect this d4 square. White had to reinforce it with a move like queen d2 or queen d3. This move is too slow, and it loses on the spot because of this bishop taking the knight. The rook recaptures, and just a quick example. Obviously, this knight cannot move, just as we saw in the previous game, because the queen is pinned. This pawn cannot capture because of very interesting ideas like knight e6, and now this pawn is lost, so black will be up a pawn forever, and this will be fast pawn, which is super strong. The reason for this is after queen e3, this knight can still capture this pawn, and now white does not have any option. If white were to capture this knight, black sacks this rook with check. The only move is for rook to recapture, and now this queen is hanging. So the only available move here was for the rook to capture this d4 square. We still play knight e6, and we still push this pawn. White tries the last resort just to trade off pieces, which isn't very effective because we've already pushed this pawn with great initiative. The pawn gets traded off. We play knight e4, attacking this knight and rook at the same time. This is one of the few rare cases where you can actually fork a knight with some other piece just because this knight is pinned to the queen. The rook slides back. We play knight f4, trying to set up ideas like this. Here white plays d5. We play a5 with a very simple idea of playing b4 and just winning this knight. White plays queen b3. This is in order to prevent the pin. Now the knight can freely move around, but it's too late because the b-pawn gets pushed. We trade, knight e2. And now this fork comes to fruition since the queen is no longer on the second file. And now the rest is really easy. I'm just going to slide through these moves and show you guys how quickly this game ended. The knight went back, queen came up. And this is a really, really cool move I want to show you guys. The queen actually can sacrifice itself because of bank many opportunities. So if this rook was to capture the queen, the rook was simply mate. And very, very quickly, white resigned. Now, last but not least, I wanted to show you guys how you can punish the I2P if you get into an endgame where most of the pieces were traded off and the pawn wasn't really pushed. The opposing side wasn't able to create kingside attacks. This is pretty much how you can punish it. So earlier in the video, I mentioned that you can exploit other weaknesses thanks to the I2P being a permanent target. The side with the I2P will be forced to just constantly protect it and divert all of the attention to the pawn. So the side with the I2P will not be able to protect any other pawns pretty much. So our very intuitive move is rook c1. We just want to get rid of this knight so this pawn is capturable. And after rook c8, we have this nice move, rook c6. And the idea is quite simple. You're just targeting this pawn. And after this move, this pawn is no longer defendable. So let's say black tries to hang on with something like, I don't know, g5. Just drop our knight back. We're attacking this pawn now. And after, for example, this pawn is just hanging, and this is a completely winning position for white. Actually, after h6, this pawn hangs as well. So in most of these cases, there's almost no way to hang on for the side with the weak I2P because every other single pawn is very, very exploitable, and you can get super active positions this way. As we can see, black's position is super cramped. For example, in this case, this knight cannot get moved after, let's say, I don't know, knight here. We can just win the I2P and white will be up a pawn in a very comfortable endgame. This sums up everything I wanted to show you guys for this particular I2P pawn structure. Please consider checking out Mauricio Flores Rios' book on pawn structures. It's a great book. And thank you everybody so much for watching and hope you guys have a great day.